would you say that the current processing design in the intelligence cycle is reflecting this? Because it talks about integration and interpretation and so on. Would you say that it's easy to kind of introduce this thinking into how does processing at the moment, according to the intelligence cycle?
Well, it is not easy, actually. If you look into is it the NP17 or NP18, the processing
18.
18, yeah. If you look it up, then you see what they did is they say we do everything like we did it before, and then you see the break in the logic, because then they say, and don't forget to use structured analytic techniques. But what they were not capable of doing is integrating structured analytic techniques in the process we have right now. And that's, from my point of view, the great weakness of this paper, which I tried to address when it was in a draft edition. And well, you see how it is published right now. So I have not been very successful in this, but I think this shows very good the problem of combining SATs into the process itself. Although if you think about it, and if you think about SATs as tools from a toolbox, then you can use them very flexible in whatever step of analysis in the analytical process. So you can use it whenever it fits. And I think the question which SATs you should use depends mainly, if not exclusively, on the character of the question you are trying to answer. And so if you use this as starting point, then it should not be so difficult to combine the doctrine we have already with the SAT approach.
Markus, you're also very familiar with the intelligence cycle. Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, one of those factors, and that's also true for techniques. They are wonderful to give you a good idea and give you some conceptual background how you can do and how you should do things, and how to also structure and giving it a sequence. The thing that we have discussed also in another meeting intensively is the question whether this follows really reality, whether you can have really those sequence and order and the follow-up of techniques and also steps within the analytical process. Because it's definitely true that with ongoing analysis and with an ongoing process of informing and decisions, or informing your decision maker and decision support, you also, of course, change not only the expectation and the inside of your decision makers, but you also change, of course, the operational environment, so to say. And this means that you always need to step back at some point, and this sometimes really leads to confusion. Let me put the other way around. It's sometimes you can really learn within an laboratory experiment, and I would say that my university and my classroom is a laboratory experiment. I have a lot of analysts sitting in front of me that I can name students, and I give them a task, and then they move on. And that's my experience that I share, is that they really behave like analysts in a kind of a military organization, because you give them a task and then they disappear for weeks, even for weeks. And then they came up with an idea and say, okay, this is our result. And by looking at the result, of course, you maybe have new ideas, and then you maybe change the task, and then you're looking very disappointed faces because they say, I don't want to go back to the why section. So we have got through all those literatures, through all those data. Right now we have a common ground where we would like to lift off, and now you come up with new ideas, and that's what people, of course, are afraid, and even analysts are afraid of. So what I would like to say here is that sometimes it gives you a nice architecture, nice structure that gives you an order into your analytical process, and gives you kind of really as I said, like a recipe, so that you really know what to do. But we should not expect that this is going to happen in reality step by step like that one. This can really change very quickly, and that's once again where you need experienced analysts that they know how to apply these steps and maybe give orientation to the team. And that's what I say. It's one of the utmost important competence and skills for those who lead analytical teams, that they make a meta-analysis of the analytical process, so that they know that maybe right now we maybe leave this pathway, maybe we have to jump back to a step and give orientation for those who are within those analytical steps, because that's really a task that stands for its own, so to say. These meta controlling of the analytical process.
Ole, with reference to the spectrum you mentioned, would that mean that we need to be prepared to move up and down within our analysis process in this spectrum? So going back to the why questions, even though we have already started to answer the first questions?
Well, if, for example, a decision maker comes to you and asks you what will the enemy do, basically, if he asks you to create scenarios, then you have, from my point of view, you have to take this question and you have to mirror it down the analytical spectrum, because when you are asked what will he do, then the evidence base for what you can describe is on the first step of the analytical spectrum, because you have to ask, what has he done so far, with which forces, and so forth. So you have to build an evidence base. And the next step is you have to identify drivers. So you have to step up on the analytical spectrum to explanatory analysis, and you have to ask, why has the enemy done what he has done so far? And this is the way, hopefully, to create drivers that will have an effect in the future too. And these drivers, they are the foundation for scenario generation. So I think, and I think that's something that Professor Brzezinski also referred to. You have to use all these other techniques too if you have a foresight analysis project, because you have to have a foundation. Otherwise, it's not a foresight session or foresight analysis, it's just speculation. You need something to base and to root your analysis in. And that's evidence, that's the past and the pattern you can distill from what has happened so far and the dynamics that led to what happened so far.
Marcus, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I would like to add some idea on that one, because actually, I would say that, the current pandemic is a really good example where you can see where the problems is. And when we see how political decision makers base their decisions on the results of or the recommendations of analysts, so to say, as specialists and scientists, that's a really good thing to see, because I would say it's a nightmare for analysts, to be honest. And it's a good example where you can really see how it maybe even works within military staff organizations, because the analysts come around the corner and say, okay, this is what we expect, and we recommend you to do this. And the political decision maker says, no, we're not going to do that because it's maybe not to be accepted by the public, right? So as soon as they step in front of the camera and so to say, publish their decision, the analysts have immediately to jump back to their desks, because this immediately, of course, changes their assumptions, their drivers, and their forecasts and their models. So I would say that right now, all those who are working on computer models for the spread of the virus are maybe listening to the press releases and press statements of the political decision makers, and then immediately run back to their computers and say, okay, now let's see what the public makes out of that one and how this maybe will change our assumptions within the model. And by that one, I would just like to say that sometimes we discuss in these kind of very clean, rather sterile context where we see, okay, I have the analysis, right, and it's completely distant from the real world ongoing business, and then I come up with these analytical products, and then this gives direction, as the analysis will not have any kind of impact into the conduct or the development of ongoing operations or the situation at hand, because even though maybe you don't give any operational recommendations, the pure fact that maybe people know that some people are doing analysis and trying to develop ideas of how things may be going to develop, this also triggers people maybe even to change their behavior. So it's an illusion to believe that the analysis happens behind closed doors and nobody is expecting analysis to take place. I know that's maybe rather sounds a little bit philosophical in this context here, but I just want to like to really stress the point that we as analysts should not believe that whatever we do has no connection then to the development of the real world. We are interfering into the world, right? So it's not like back into the future that we are not allowed to intervene in the current affairs to change maybe the future or the past. We're doing it already, even by conducting analysis.
I think it's not only a philosophical question, but it raises very practical ones. And one of the questions would be, to what extent are SRTs capable to deal with new information when you're in the thinking process, new incoming information? So if you would like to say that one.
Yeah, definitely. And once again, I would like to share my real world experience from, let's say, the real operations, so to say, military and civil operations, but also with my interaction with students. And there's nothing more that people hate more than, once again, than to revise their assumptions. And that's exactly where you have this kind of, it may not, or you should not name it stereotyping, right? But you have some mental models that you have worked hard on and where you really spent a lot of time and invested a lot of energy to develop those models and your assumptions, and you have made a lot of maybe data research and reading. And then, of course, you like to stick to those ideas and you do everything to defend those things. So we have two parts into it. The first one is that the analytical, let's say, actor or the analytical person, the analyst as a person, as an element within a process, is in itself hesitating to revise his assumptions. And that's actually where the SRT is really, giving a warning sign, saying, hey, come on. It should be your profession to change your assumption. It should be your preferred priority to throw overboard all your beloved and hypothesis. And the second thing is, of course, what kind of data are getting into this process? Where do they come from? And what kind of biases they already have by the beginning, right? Let me make one of those statements here. We have right now the ongoing, I would say, dispute and maybe I know that's maybe a hard word to choose for this situation, but I would say it's a kind of a dispute between qualitative and quantitative analysis, right? And what I can see here is that sometimes the quantitative analysis is kept to be more valid than maybe the qualitative analysis into it. I'm not going too deep into the discussion because I know we had this discussion already and weighing the arguments in that one. But what I would like to say is that by designing a specific analytical process, you always maybe pre-design the information that can feed into this process. Let's make an example. If you have more qualitative analysts on board, then you will maybe fail with feeding into quantitative data, right? As you maybe have quantitative analysts and you come up with some qualitative ideas, they are going to fail to feed into the system. And that's something I would say that it's maybe not out of the range of the SATs, but that's something that's within the organization and the structure of the process, and that's something that we should keep in mind, and where I would say I see also room for improvement in teaching and training.
Ole, would you like to add something?
Maybe in general concerning how to deal with new information. I think that certain SATs literally force you to feed them with new information, which must then be taken into account into the analysis. And this starts with simple techniques like chronologies or timelines, which are never completed, at least in the current analysis area. And it ends with more sophisticated techniques like the analysis of competing hypotheses, which we already talked about, which are perfect for directly processing new information and evaluating them against the current working hypotheses. And this also with regard to the diagnostic nature of the information. So in my opinion, not all, but a lot of SATs are useful tools to continuously integrate new information into analysis projects, even though this might not be convenient necessarily for the analyst itself. If it comes to, all right, we have information which is relevant, but it does not feed into any of our hypotheses, because this means that you have missed one hypothesis and you have to generate more, which can be very painful maybe. But SATs give you a framework to do this.
If I may, I would like to jump in immediately to that one. Sebastian, is it okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, that's a really good point that you made, Ole. And just to let you share my experiences in this context, I found it interesting, and I would like to dig a little bit too deeper into that one by a really, let's say, kind of a small research on that one. But what I have seen when I see analysts working with for example, hypotheses for different scenarios, that they could show up in the end and say, okay, we weren't able to develop different scenarios. Whatever we did, and even if we feed it into a computer system, the computer always come up with only one scenario. And then you look carefully into the assumptions and hypotheses, and what comes up then is that in the end, what they have done is that they stated that they have developed drivers that were unbiased, so to say. So they have to identify drivers, key drivers, and interdependencies between those key drivers. And they invested a lot of work and even said, okay, we have applied all the SATs, so we have really cross-checked them. We had the devil's advocacy and so on and so on and so on. But what you can see is that what they have done in the end, that they have just buttressed and improved their own framings and biases within those key drivers. And by that one, haven't lost the chance really to develop, as you said, stronger. And as you said, it's painful, because what you really need to go is you really go back to the start and really ask yourself, I really try to throw everything of those basic assumptions away and trash them. And then I completely start with a new approach to that one. And that's really painful and hard. And that's really interesting to see that sometimes, that by applying the SATs or having the illusion that you have applied the SATs, all the way down, that you come up with a result that is not really convincing, and really then to go back and get into the details, it's sometimes then there's even no time for it, right? And the result is then that either people complain about the SATs or just accept a biased result. Yeah, that's interesting.
If I may, Sebastian?
Yeah, sure.
All right. The first thing is what I think is interesting about this, or which shows the benefit of SATs. I do not think necessarily that these people might have seen their own mistake if they were not using SATs. So if they had just jumped from the situation now and intuitively created scenarios, then this might not even be something that they would stumble upon. So SATs in this case even gives you the possibility to recreate scenarios and to see that you have made a mistake. And the second thing is, Randy, correct me on this if I get wrong, but I mean, this shows SATs are just thinking tools, and you have to, all your biases, I mean, it goes into the analysis, and you have to be aware of these. And it's not the aim of SATs to stick to the results just because you have produced them, even though you might have done the technique correctly. If you, in the end, are of the opinion that what you have produced does not fit reality, then you always have the possibility to throw it away and say, all right, we start from the scratch again.